Our scripture for the message, we're finishing Acts 16. This is verse 35 through 40. Now when it was day, the magistrates sent the police, saying, "Let those men go." The jailer reported these words to Paul, saying, "The magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore come out now and go in peace." But Paul said to them, "They've beaten us publicly. Uncondemned men who are Roman citizens have thrown us into prison. And do they now throw us out secretly? No. Let them come themselves and take us out." The police reported these words to the magistrates. They were afraid when they heard that they were Roman citizens. And so they came and they apologized to them. They took them out and asked them to leave the city. And so they went out of the prison and visited Lydia. And when they had seen the brethren, they encouraged them and departed. May God add his blessing through the reading of his word. A lot of Christians get very upset over politics, whether that's local or state or country or international. We're tempted to forget that Psalm 2 tells us that all the works of all of the countries throughout all of history don't even begin to pose a threat to the work that God is doing through Jesus. And they can't stop it in any way. Now we know this by faith, though, not by sight. To our eyes, it looks like all sorts of bad political activity occurs in various levels, and that's what's ruling the world, it seems to our eyes, and it seems to ruin people's lives. But faith, trusting in God, reminds us that all is not what it seems to our eyes. And even occasionally, God does give a sign to our eyes to show us that Jesus is the true ruler. And by faith, we know that someday we will be able to see, on the day of the Lord, that every knee will bow to Christ the Lord. That's what our text is lifting up for us today. It's a sign that I think God is giving especially for the new Christians at Philippi, and to occur before Paul leaves. Remember that Paul and Barnabas had been thrown into prison. They were beaten. They hadn't had a trial or anything. It was just told that they were Jews and upsetting the city, so they beat them. They threw them into prison. The earthquake occurred that we looked at last week. And then they're back in prison this morning, and the magistrates send the police, or that's the closest word we have to translate. Literally, the word means rod bearers. So these are the people who had the big long rods that would have been beating Paul and Silas and creating all those wounds over their body. They're being sent to the jailer with orders, "Let those men go." So the jailer, along with these rod bearers, go to Paul and said, "The magistrates have sent that you should be released. So now, when you come out, go in peace." Now remember, Paul would have been praying, as he did around midnight before the earthquake, would still be praying for Jesus to work through him. He wanted God's witness to come in some kind of a way. And so we might expect that if we were in his situation and been beaten, been put into prison, we might want to get out of Dodge, as the saying goes, as quickly as possible. So as soon as those magistrates come and here's the people that beat us with the rods are right there as well, we might just want to leave town. But that's not what Paul does. He says something surprising. After they publicly beat us, uncondemned men, though we were Romans, they cast us into prison, and now secretly they're casting us out? No. But when they have come, let the magistrates themselves lead us out. Now God is giving a sign here, I think, through Paul. To the eyes of especially the new Christians at Philippi, the magistrates and these rod bearers, these police, are the ones who rule the town. But God is showing through Paul that they are powerless before Jesus and his work. That's why after Paul says this, the police go and report back to the magistrates what Paul says, and we're told they were afraid. They had just assumed that a Jew could not be a Roman citizen, and it turned out they were the ones, not Paul, who had acted unlawfully. It was unlawful to condemn a Roman citizen without a trial. There was no trial. It was just said that they were accused of being Jews, and so the magistrates ordered them to be beaten and then have them thrown into prison. So now they come to the prison, and in this translation they apologized, or literally the word just means comforted or exhorted. They comforted Paul and Silas as if trying to sound nice all of a sudden towards him after they had done this mistake, and they requested, not ordered, that they leave the city. These aren't normal actions for someone who rules and is in charge. So we see that Paul, once he's been requested to do this, he doesn't obey them. Instead, what does he do? He doesn't leave the city right away. He goes to Lydia's house. And it said, when they had seen the brethren, and the same word is now used in a good sense, Paul and Silas comforted them, the new Christians, and only then did they leave. This was a sign, as I said, that the magistrates and police who appeared to be in power are acting nice in order to make up for their own unlawful deeds and requesting, not ordering them to leave. These magistrates and police are not truly the ones who rule. Christ rules. Now, it's only a sign. The magistrates and police aren't killed. They're still there. They're still going to do enforcement in various ways, sometimes unlawfully. But in the moment of this sign, it's saying that they are helpless. They are powerless before the work of God. It's God reminding them that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the one who is truly in charge and truly rules. Someday, they know that they will be able to see every knee bow to Christ the Lord. And until then, his work will be able to be carried out no matter how good or bad, relatively, any political activity is on any level. This is still true today. Jesus is the true ruler. Now, we don't see that with our eyes. We see it by faith. Only on the last day will we see it with our eyes. And yet even now, we can't demand it and expect it, but God can grant us signs to remind us that Jesus is Lord. Let's hear about one of those signs in the life of Corrie. Many of you know about her story. She and her family had hidden Jews in their house in Holland and then got caught by the Nazis, and Corrie and her older sister Betsy had spent 8 months in a concentration camp in Holland. But in September 1944, things changed. The Allies were advancing. Remember, D-Day was in May, and this is September. So they're advancing closer to where the concentration camp is, and some of the prisoners are hearing about this and thinking maybe they'll be released. But no, over 1,000 women were lined up, and they were herded into railroad cars. Corrie remembered when she was being pushed in, she instinctively reached for the string that was around her neck. From it, there was a small bag that she'd had on her back that was carrying her Bible, and it was down between her shoulder blades, the forbidden book which God had used to sustain them for 8 months. She said that boxcars were crowded so full there was very little ventilation, just a few cracks where they weren't made perfectly. And they were put in so much that some of the women in the heat were fainting, but they couldn't fall to the ground because their bodies were pressed so close together. They went on a 3-day journey, and barely any water. Sometimes they would barely crack the door open and put a bucket there. And Corrie said they got to feeling like they were animals, and so the women at the front took all of the water, and there was none for any that were further back from the door. They had to be like this for 3 full days. She saw the town of Emmerich go by. That was the border town between Holland and Germany, so she knew they were heading to Germany. On the 4th morning, the doors swung wide open, and there was only a few guards there. She said we could scarcely walk, let alone resist, so that's all they needed was a few guards. They got out, they saw this barrack city that was surrounded by 2 concrete walls. Ravensbrück. They had heard stories of the horrors that went on there. How could we get the Bible past inspection, Corrie wondered. The women at the front of the line that she was in were being made to take off all of their clothes and walk past the guards to go into a shower room. Corrie knew a little German, so she begged the guards to be able to let her and her sister use the toilets. He just motioned towards the shower room and said, "Use the drain hose." They went into the shower room, which was empty, waiting for another group of 50 women. And Corrie then saw a pile of wooden benches, said, crawling with cockroaches. But to us, the furniture of heaven itself. She hid her Bible behind those benches. When we were herded into that room 10 minutes later, we were not poor, but rich. Rich in the care of Him who was God even in Ravensbrück. Now they were given only a little flimsy prison outfit to wear, and the Bible bulged out in her back, and she had it, but she trusted, well, if God brought us this far, somehow she would find a way to have us be able to keep it. Every woman was searched before they left that building. Every woman but Corrie. They did not touch or even look at me. Now, it wasn't in the clear yet, because outside the building there was a second inspection. And Corrie instinctively slowed down as she got to the guard, but then suddenly she was shoved by a captain roughly on the shoulder and said, "Move along, you're holding up the line." So she said, Betsy and I came to our barracks at Ravensbrück. Before long, we were doing secret Bible study groups for an ever-growing group of believers. And Barracks 28 became known throughout the camp as the crazy place where they hope. Yes, Corrie said, hope. In spite of all that human madness could do, we learned that a stronger power had the final word, even here. If we have been or are now upset with the powers that be, whether they're local, state, or country, or throughout the world, let us remember that Jesus is the true ruler. Nothing can stop His work. And on the last day, we will see every knee will bow to Christ the Lord. Until then, let us walk by faith, not by sight. God may grant us various signs, as Paul did, through Paul to the Philippians, or as happened to Corrie and her sister. We can't demand them or expect them, but we should receive them with joy. And even if we do not get a sign, let us trust that Jesus and Jesus alone is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Amen.